Archetypes give you emotional dimension to your brand, just like color does. So it's not just about consistency. It's about active, creation of personality, and it's about inspiration because it'll get people thinking about new things.
Marketing expert Todd Olsen is on to discuss brand archetypes and what is behind some of the deliberate choices that iconic brands like North Face or Old Spice or Nike or Disney make in terms of color, content, advertising, consumer experience based on this brand archetype work. Also, maybe you're a fan of The Office, the show, and the first segment is about a contest we're doing where you can nominate the world's greatest boss, and the prize is 2 tickets to paradise. So if you're an Office superfan, you probably get both those references. In fact, Marty, our editor-in-chief, and I had a colleague of ours, Billy Liang, he's an Office superfan, join that first segment to discuss his favorite moments from the show, comment on the contest, and some other stuff. If you're interested in actually nominating someone for the contest, we have that detail in the show notes and also links to both the brand archetype visual that Todd and I reference and to Kingston Marketing Group. Thanks. Okay, we've got our weekly segment with the B newsletter crew, and we're going to talk about the show The Office. The U.S. Office made news again over the last week by being atop the streaming ratings. People are watching it as much, if not more than ever. And so we're doing a contest and promotion at business.com around The Office, and we're bringing in our colleague, Billy Liang, who's an Office superfan, to comment on the contest. We're going to ask him some questions and have a little fun. Thanks for joining, Billy.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
You got it.
Well, Billy, the contest is the Best Boss in the World contest, and we're asking people to nominate their boss based on, does their boss have the qualities that Michael Scott had for inspiring a team and making them feel valued and making them feel that they're bringing out their best. I guess the first question would be, did Michael Scott actually do that? Was he a good boss, or was he in fact not the world's best boss?
I think that he was a good boss, despite any shortcomings he may have had.
Did his approach change over time? Because it seems like in the early seasons, he was creating these awkward situations, but over time, maybe he softened a bit and earned more loyalty?
I think he was pretty much the same throughout, but then there was like more character development, and then also he went through a lot of, I guess, trial and error. He did face the scrutiny in the beginning of the series, but halfway through, he learned, and then there's also these like nice moments of the show where he was able to, I guess, prove that he also is just a human being at the end of the day.
So if an alien was to land on Earth and you were to show that alien one episode of The Office to show like what the funniest possible thing was to describe The Office humor to the alien, what episode would you choose?
Dinner Party.
Dinner Party?
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the premise of that one?
It's like when Michael Scott has a dinner party at his condo, and he's like dating Jan full time now. So then he invites a bunch of the office people, like the employees, to have dinner with him. And the whole time, him and like Jan are like basically facing off in terms of like how they could make it as awkward as possible, and then like stuff like that. There's just so many like scenes where it's like super, super awkward, where they start arguing about things. And then there's one scene where he has like a plasma screen TV, but it's like 22 inches. And he's like, oh, this is like my livelihood. And then at the end of like the show or the episode, Jan like takes one of his Dundies and like just throws it at like the TV. It's just super chaotic.
I've got to watch that episode again. I have seen that one. That one is super funny. So we haven't told you about what you win. The contest is you're nominating the world's greatest boss. And if that boss wins, we're providing an all-expense paid vacation to Sandals, Jamaica. Do you remember that plot in The Office? I think Michael takes Jan there. Mm-hmm. What do you remember about that? And do you think that's somewhere people would want to go?
For sure. I think that is a place that people would want to go. But the premise of that show or that episode is that he bought 2 tickets to go to Sandals, Jamaica with like his current girlfriend at the time, Carol, which is actually his real wife in real life. The person that acts, the actor. And then they have like this casino night event. It's like their 3rd date. And then he like gets on one knee and proposes to her on the 3rd date, which is crazy. And she's like, oh no, Michael, like it's only been the 3rd date. So then she dumps him. He ends up going with Jan. And then he like takes a weird, inappropriate photo with Jan there and then accidentally distributes it around the office. Yeah, that's the premise of that episode.
All right. Well, hopefully that doesn't happen to the winner. The winner just goes and enjoys himself or herself at Sandals Jamaica. Billy, thanks for being here. Hi, Todd. How are you? Good to see you.
Great. Good to see you, John.
Yeah, it was fun. We grabbed coffee, which we do every once in a while, last Friday. We were talking about all kinds of interesting things, marketing. So thanks for coming on the pod. And where I wanted to start was all brands that are iconic. Apple, Gucci, Nike, Burger King. They all connect with their audience in a really deep and meaningful way. And they're all really thoughtful about how they do that, probably to build authenticity, loyalty, trust. And I know that's one of the things that you help brands with a lot and you think about a lot. And you also have a number of different exercises that you take brands through, like customer journey mapping or personas. But the one that I want to talk about today, which I know you're really passionate about, is brand archetypes. And maybe we can start. I can just ask you the question: what is a brand archetype?
Yeah. So, have you ever heard of a person by the name of Carl Jung?
Sort of. It's like it's like a psychology person.
Yeah,
right?
He's, I guess, one of the fathers of modern psychology and psychiatry. So he was actually friends with Sigmund Freud.
Okay.
And he's kind of a mystic, actually. He's a somewhat controversial guy, but he was really important in the field. And he had this idea called collective unconscious, which is that we share collective, like in our DNA, collectively, we share personality elements, and that we are connected to everybody else through these shared personality elements, which he called archetypes. And so he created 12 distinct archetypes, and things like ruler, creator, innocent, sage, explorer. And his theory was that these were all embedded into everybody at birth, and that they were waiting to basically form and materialize through the other big personality factor, which is cultural experience. Basically, like you being raised by your parents, your peers, your friends, your colleagues, your life experiences. And so those two things form into your personality. And this was all done in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And it's interesting. What made it relevant to marketing and branding is that some time ago, I don't know, I think it's basically open source at this point, but a really smart marketer, not us, applied brands to them. So if you, I'm looking at a color wheel right now, and I realize this is trickier for podcast medium because it is visual. So I'll try and describe it a little bit.
We'll also, by the way, we'll put a link to it in the show notes. We might pop it up on the YouTube version of it. But okay. Yes, I know what you mean. Perfect. I've got it up in front of me too.
You can envision. I think most people have seen a color wheel.
Yep.
We're like Roy G. Biv, colors of the rainbow, and they're kind of bent into a circle. And it's a color wheel, and you can use this color wheel to create color palettes and like find complementary colors, like colors that are directly across from each other on the wheel are complementary, which is why you see certain color pairings in the world. And a couple smart things about this is, one, it maps these 12 distinct personalities, and I'm going to cover each one as part of this, so people have an idea of kind of what the bones of it are. But they assigned to each archetype like a brand that was this kind of this like aspirational brand that stands for the archetype. So I'll give you an example. So across the wheel, I've got magician is one of Carl Jung's archetypes, and the magician can be described as intuitive, insightful, inspiring, and the magician's personality purpose is to transform the ordinary into extraordinary. So if, you could probably imagine what lead brand is there, John. I'll put you on the spot. What's a brand? When I say magician, transformational, turning the ordinary into the extraordinary, which brand do you think of?
I'm looking at the color wheel, so okay. I know, but I probably would have said anyway, Disney.
Yeah,
even with the Magic Kingdom, right. At the beginning of every movie, they've got their iconic castle and the magic kind of thing going over it. I think that's a brand that super exemplifies what you're talking about,
and they deliver. Right, they deliver through their entertainment platform. They bought Pixar, and well, here's what we'll get into, like what these can do for you. But go to the park, right? They deliver on the experience. So I think it's a great example, and there's an example for each one of these. And the other interesting thing, useful, and thank you to whoever did this. I would love to buy you a coffee if you hear this podcast. is applied to the color wheel, right? So why I think this is interesting is that color conveys meaning as well. And so we now have a handy tool that gives you kind of the personality elements, and then what color maps to those personality elements. And you have this multidimensional way to help mine the elements of your particular brand personality. And you not only have this kind of North Star brand, if you were to choose, for instance, the everyman, the brand most we associate that with is IKEA, is a good example. And so you not only have this North Star brand, you're like, yeah, that is, all things being equal for our brand, we identify with IKEA, but you also get these colors. And so when you do those together, and it depends on how early on you want to do it, you just get a lot of really high utility, and you don't have to do, it's a low lift, right? You don't have to do a bunch of, it's not a research driven exercise. It's a way. And so we use it for a number of different ways. So you mentioned, John, kind of our go-to, we have a lot of process. We're big on process, but we have some go-to tools, and they're all actually open source. It's the facilitation is the thing for us, but we create personas, which is your customer on a page. We create a brand foundation, which is distilling your messaging and your mission statement and your value prop, your reasons to believe, the emotional territory, all on a page. We do customer journey mapping, which is mapping on a whiteboard your customer's problem and their journey in problem initiation to solving the problem, and where you fit as a brand. And that becomes the basis for a marketing plan. And then archetypes. So we can do all that together. You end up with this toolkit that you can use to consistently and actively build your brand in the marketplace.
And I was going to go into the wheel, and one of the things that I thought was really cool. There's one of the archetypes is called the jester. Mm-hmm. And the canonical example here is Old Spice. And that's a brand that's really, really true to that. And when they started their Jester campaign, it feels like it's 10 or 15 years old. It doesn't feel like Old Spice was perpetually like this. It may have been, but as a series of campaigns where a man, a guy would be like a horse and a man, and like men have skin too, and all these like really funny tongue-in-cheek type commercials. I think Burger King, actually, which I mentioned before, is kind of like that as well. To me, anyway.
Yeah. Well, it gives you a counterpoint in the marketplace. That's one of the uses of this. So I don't think, like, my grandfather used Old Spice. So when I smell Old Spice, I think of my grandfather. So it just has different meaning for me. I love their campaign, and they've embraced it and they own it, right? They now have brand association with Jester, and they have permission to embrace and perpetuate that archetype in the marketplace, and they kind of own it, right? If you were a new player, you might stay away from that space because it's kind of owned, right? Like, people would confuse you with Old Spice if you tried to do what they're doing, and they're using archetypes to do it. And archetypes allow you to codify it too. So it's not just, it could be that, I think they've been going for close to a decade now, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It could be that an agency came to them with this campaign, but since they've been consistent with it, they own it now, and it's part of their archetype DNA. And so I would imagine that they would not only continue to do that, but they would look for opportunities to do that. And it might even make its way onto their product roadmap, who they partner with, who their distributors are, who they partner with on the influencer side. So naming it is the first part, and then thinking, how can we go further with this, is the second part. And that's where it becomes active.
I also wonder, I as you were saying this, I was thinking about big competitive categories. So in the wireless space, Verizon's red, AT&T is blue, Consumer Cellular's orange, T-Mobile's magenta. And then you have insurance, Allstate's blue, State Farm's red. I know I'm leaving. Liberty Mutual's yellow. Like, I'm sure there's some deliberateness to saying we've got to be different. But if you were someone new entering in the market, how would you think, like, you're a brand new wireless provider, how would you think about trying to craft who you are versus those in the space?
So you definitely want to intentionally look at the people in the space, because you don't want to tread on, right? You want to carve out your own space, for sure, to your point. And so you want to be aware of who the players are and kind of what their go-to-market, what their brand is made of. And then you can borrow, because they don't own. So if you think about the color blue, right? Color blue conveys control and trust, and which is why it's so popular in loyalty, competence. Those are the meaning, the conveyance meanings of the color blue. And so it's become kind of a touchstone color. And so I would want to, if we were doing this workshop with them, I would start with archetypes, would start with personality, and I'd say we'd go through the list together. And we can even do this, John, if you want. But if they felt that, trust was an important part of their brand, then they might choose the sage, for example, or even the ruler, right? The ruler is it's a high confidence archetype, and that gives you blue, but you don't want to just be blue. Otherwise you're not going to stand out. And so how I would use this in a complementary way is I would say, we always want to pick one primary archetype, just like you would color, right? It's very, very similar. You also want to have a couple accent colors, because that's what gives dimension, and that's what creates tension and interest for your brand. Because if you just pick one, it's going to be, frankly, very boring in the marketplace, and it's going to be one-dimensional, and there's going to be no differentiation. You actually want to give your social media team or your internal writers or your agency, you want to give them a little tension, because that's where interesting things happen. So for every blue, I want an accent color. And that's actually where we start with archetypes is, and I think this is the most interesting thing, is when you go through the exercise, you pick your primary, and then you say, okay, what are our accent archetypes? And you're looking for things that are already there. You can also think about your customers. You can do a look back and say, like, what are the things we've created as a brand that have resonated for us, or that have resonated with our customers? Or maybe it's founder led, or maybe, you are being opportunistic. Maybe an agency found this in a campaign, and you're like, you know what, that really is us. And so you find your accent colors, and then the three together make up your archetype wheel, and you map them on a color wheel. And this is what's interesting to me, is always happens, is we almost always duplicate the existing color wheel of the brand, because it was already there. And, or a founder will say to me, this was our original color palette.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
So whether or not they were, it was subconscious or whatever. Yeah. Or unconscious, whatever.
Collective unconscious, maybe Carl was right.
Yeah. And also you wonder if there's a little bit, if it's true, we all have these 12 personality types, and they just manifested themselves. The color choice brought the type of customer that ended up being your ideal customer. It was almost like, was it causation or correlation?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question.
I want to ask kind of an investment question. When is it the best time, or when is it a good time to really think about these things? Is it A, we're going to redo our website? Is it B, we have kind of we're trying to grow in this way, or we want to connect with customers, or we want to solve this customer issue? Like, when is it most valuable in your mind to conduct an exercise like this?
I think now, right? Like, it's never too late. I think it would always be helpful. I think it's excellent if you're kicking off a rebrand, or if you're starting a brand. If you haven't, because when you start a brand, part of your toolkit is you'll create a logo, you'll create key messaging, you'll create some of the things that we talked about earlier. With the logo, right? You don't just create a logo, you create a color palette, you create typefaces, and you pull them together in a visual style guide, which are kind of like the guidelines, so that you don't break the rules. Like, if your typeface is Helvetica Futura, and somebody comes, an agency creates something for you that is Comic Sans, right? That would be a problem. It would always be a problem if it were Comic Sans, right. But it's a problem. The same is true for personality, because you want your writers writing with a consistent voice, and you want to always be thinking about the emotional territory, because that's actually where the action is. And archetypes give you emotional dimension to your brand, just like color does. So it's not just about consistency. It's about active, creation of personality, and it's about inspiration, because it'll get people thinking about new things. So you can do it at any time. And it's not a heavy lift. The heavy lift is actually putting it to use. And it's discipline, right? Like, the gym membership is free. You have to go to the gym. And then you're, that's the cost is really, are you willing to be disciplined?
You proposed to me offline or offered of actually doing kind of a real-time exercise like this on the brand that this podcast is related to, which is business.com, and also the newsletter, the B newsletter. What do you say? Should we try this in real time? We're not exactly in the process of a rebrand, but we are trying to hone in on who we connect with. And I'm talking about the actual website, which has, yeah, let's do it. So how do we start?
I thought this might come up, so I went there earlier.
Okay.
I spent a little time on the site.
Thank you.
I think there's a little bit of opportunity. So I think we should start by, if you feel it's okay, I could do a quick rundown of the archetypes.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right. So there are 12. But as I'm running them down, do people want to know what business.com is? Maybe give the elevator pitch real quick.
Yeah. So business.com provides advice and recommendations on how to grow your business. And that can involve advice for editorial content and all these different stages of business, whether you're trying to diversify, reinvent yourself, manage a crisis, or research and select a product and service that'll help your business, whether it's a credit card processor, HR software, or whatever.
One question we would often ask is if there's a center bullseye type of business owner that you feel just fits perfectly. And no, understanding there's always a range, right? But who do you imagine being like the best customer for this? Like, do they have a size or?
We think so. So there are 11 million businesses between $50,000 and $50 million in revenue. So the site isn't it's not for Amazon. It's not right. For Amazon exactly. It's not for somebody who's incubating an idea, although I'm sure we have a bunch of stuff that is helpful there. And it's not really about like tech startups or the VC world, but it's for these 11 million businesses between 50,000, 50 million that make up a really significant chunk of our economy and tens of millions of jobs. So that's who we think the site helps.
Okay. So like maybe like a retailer, a small retailer, or
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Even a big retailer. Yeah.
Big. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So let's think about somebody in that zone. Okay. And so when we're thinking through these, like listen for what you know about the brand, right? You've been connected to the brand for a long time. You've seen it come to life. You're in the day-to-day. You're seeing the content come across. You're seeing how it's resonating with your customers. You're actually connecting it to real customers, getting feedback. And so think like, is it hitting for you as I'm reading some of these?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the first one is the creator. So this is naturally expressive, original, and imaginative. The creator wishes to see new ideas take shape and see visions realized. You'll see this with a lot of technology brands, and Apple and Lego are good examples of creators. The next one is caregiver. Compassionate, nurturing, dedicated. Their purpose in life is to help others. So a lot of protection, safety, support. Brands, American Red Cross, Four Seasons, Make-A-Wish Foundation. Okay. The ruler, confident, competent, responsible. Ruler aims to be a role model to others. Porsche, Rolex, Mercedes-Benz, FedEx, ruler brands. Then Everyman, which I've been calling people person, naturally empathetic, unpretentious, resilient. Their purpose is to be accepted and to belong. This is great for brands known for reliability and quality, trust. Subway, Walmart, Toyota, IKEA. The innocent, which are idealistic, optimistic, hopeful, wishes to live life in harmony. Wholesome, fun, wellness are words that are used to describe innocent brands. Some brands are Burt's Bees, Tom's of Maine, and Crayola. Explorer, naturally independent, authentic, curious. This archetype craves freedom and adventure, with marketing campaigns like risk-taking, travel, ambitious innovation. Brands are Land Rover, Jeep, Airbnb, North Face. Okay. We can come back to these. You don't have to remember them all.
I'm tracking.
Tracking. Okay. Okay. And then The Magician, which we talked about, Disney, Tony's Chocolonely, Dyson, transform the ordinary into extraordinary, like we said, make dreams come true, turn problems into opportunities. A lot of great territory there. The Rebel, also known as the Outlaw, unconventional thinkers who can develop new cutting edge approaches. Rebel's purpose in life is to shake up the status quo. Action-oriented brands, Harley Davidson, Virgin Airlines, Doc Martens, Red Bull. Okay. The next is the Entertainer, aka Jester. Playful, spontaneous, humorous. The Entertainer aims to make people feel good, lighten the mood, and enjoy themselves. Fun-loving, Geico.
Makes sense.
Almost any beer brand. Old Spice. Just going back to Rebel, we had a client called Acton, who is a marketing automation platform, and they had a little bit of it in their DNA, but they embraced it and just ran with it. Their whole content plan, they sent it, and it transformed how they show up, by the way. So as I read Rebel, it just reminded me, this can be transformational if you really go for it. Okay, so I'm moving on to the Hero. Determined, achievement-oriented, and focused. The hero's purpose in life is to improve the world. Nike, Gatorade. Moving on to the Sage. Intelligent, knowledgeable, reflective. Sage seeks to find answers to questions. Educational research brands, good fit. Google, TED Talks, BBC, HubSpot is probably my best in class example of the Sage, and everything they do is Sage Plus, right? So the Plus is where it gets really interesting to me. And then the Lover is the final one. This is a misunderstood archetype. So I'll read, appreciative, passionate, committed. Lover's purpose in life is to make people feel special. Let's see what else. Aesthetically beautiful. So this is a connector brand. So a lot of people think of Godiva chocolate or Victoria's Secret when they think about the Lover, but it's not a brand it's not a sex brand. It's not a love. It's actually about connecting. And so when we read the whole thing and we kind of open it up, a lot of our clients actually choose the Lover because they are about connection.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're reading these examples of brands that are so clear, and I'm going through my mind thinking, okay, I'm a B2B brand. How would I want a business to react to my brand? And there were a couple of archetypes that made sense to me. One is actually really similar to I think it was Acton was the example of kind of like the outlaw liberator.
The rebel.
The rebel kind of, because can it be sort of a problem solving brand? Because I think of the stage of business that we would want to come on business.com is like from entrepreneur to exit. And you're finding things along the way that allow you to do this, allow you to get the next stage of growth. So as you were, and whereas the site provides advice, in a lot of cases, great recommendations, I don't really think of it like the HubSpot content that I see, kind of like the how to do X, how to growth hack Y. I don't really feel like that's the goal as much.
I mean, I think the rebel for you would be a really nice accent archetype because it'll create a lot of tension. It'll make you rethink your purpose, which is, it's one thing to write an article about, managing 1099s during tax season. But it's another to talk about like, you're thinking about it all wrong. Like, here's how you really should be doing it. And that's rebel. It's shaking things up a little bit. So, and I don't know if that's where you want to go, but if you were to, it would give you a very different context, which I think would shape your content moving forward. What are we doing differently? What do we want to, because anybody can Google anything, right? There's a lot of really thorough, thoughtful, accurate, yet boring information on the internet.
We don't want that.
Oh, no. So by saying we're going to embrace rebel and we're going to come at it from a shaking up the status quo standpoint, we're going to be a little bit cutting edge. We're going to do some myth busting. That's very interesting, especially if you consider that the people you're talking to are entrepreneurs.
Maybe explorer and freedom are interesting in that way too, because we're a lot of our readers and a lot of our audience are people that want to dramatically grow their career, grow their business, grow their team, etc. And while I don't think of us as the North Face, Patagonia, those are consumer examples, that idea for what consuming this content or advice might get you is interesting as well.
Well, because that's actually an excellent use of this, because the rebel is kind of your lens on it, right? Your take is shaking things up and myth busting and cutting to the chase, giving you what you really need to know. Whereas the explorer is more about them. When you think about naturally independent, authentic, curious, craving freedom and adventure, that's them, which makes for a great pairing.
Yeah, that's true, because you can search up anything, and some people go to Wikipedia. We want people who don't want to go to Wikipedia. They want advice, recommendations, content from an expert who can give them straight, candid talk and let them make their own decisions. So that might be the way to go.
So then, I had a couple. What else did you think about?
I'd like to know what you thought. I mean, a couple of the ones related to service were interesting, just because there's that type of transaction. But I don't know. I'm curious as where your head went.
I love it because we covered the accents, right off the bat. I think it would be appropriate to ground yourself in one that represents what you do. So like caregiver is an example for me of purpose in life to help others, right? Like that would be a natural for me. When I think about business.com, I think about Everyman, which is very similar, by the way, of empathetic, unpretentious, resilient. So this is about meeting them where they are.
That's interesting.
We're for everyone. Like we're not going to talk, because what this gets you, by the way, is an output for this is a tone and personality document where we say like, if we were to say Everyman, for example, or people person, I could give you a toolkit that said people person, and I talk about what that means, practical down to earth messaging, making people feel comfortable, valued, and part of a welcoming community that shares common values and experiences. We are conversational, relatable, and practical. We are not complicated, elitist, academic, or unwelcoming, right? So then you can imagine if you had a set of those to go with your archetypes, to say, like, when we write, I want my writers to read this before they write the article.
Yeah, true. And when I look at the archetypes kind of to the side of these things on the color wheel, like the jester, we're not trying to have people laugh. We're not trying to make inside jokes.
Do you like caregiver or do you like everyman?
I think I tilt a little bit more towards caregiver, and maybe I'm reacting on the everyman or people person a little wrong in that I think that every small, medium sized business feels unique and they have their own set of challenges. And so I react more to caregiver than to people person, but it's all interpretation, I think.
Okay. So then the fun part is, so we have caregiver, which I'd say is kind of like your, maybe it's your primary. And then you've got explorer and rebel, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interesting because when you look at it on a color wheel, they're across the wheel from each other. So it's actually a viable. If you were starting from scratch, it would be a viable. Now, a designer isn't going to say, "Oh, thanks for this archetype wheel. My job's done here," right? But they're going to say, like, "Okay, I can work with this and I can create a color. I can make choices. All things being equal, I'll choose this one because it'll give you double duty because it'll also reinforce your personality." So that's how we would use this. We were starting from scratch to build a brand. Is we would do this before we brief the logo visual ID work. However, what I often find is we work with a brand midstream and we go through this exercise. They have a color palette, but they're only using one color. And it's blue. And so we can remind them that, by the way, the archetypes that everybody's excited about, the DNA of your brand's personality, the colors associated with that, these two new ones that we talked about as far as archetypes, those colors are in your palette, but you're not using them. So start using them. And then everything just gets a lot more interesting.
No question. And I think where these types of conversations, when we've had them, whether I've had them with you or in other earlier parts of my career, is you start to really, really deeply think about how your customers are connecting with your company. Because that's what you're trying to build. You're trying to build a deeper connection, which leads to more meaningful relationships, more loyalty, more revenue, et cetera. Todd, thanks so much for being on the pod today. I really appreciate our conversation.
It was fun. We did it.
Did you know that more than 20 million professionals and business owners visit business.com and Business News Daily? Why? It's the best place for resources, advice, and information about how to grow your business. And if your goal is to reach our audience, you should become one of our lead partners, sponsor a section of the site, or sponsor even this podcast. Reach us at business.com/connect. That's business.com/connect.